Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. In the quiet haze of a southern morning, ex-military engineer Taylor Hanks rolls onto his land, off-grid, free, and ready to build. But 30 yards from suburbia's grip, a war begins. No bullets, just drones, deeds, and one clipboard-wielding tyrant named Karen. I moved in on a Monday. The kind of quiet, cloudy southern morning where the air smells like wet pine and sun-warmed gravel. My truck rolled up the dirt driveway at a crawl, tires crunching as I crossed the invisible line between unincorporated rural property and the glittering edge of the Oak Ridge Preserve HOA. Not that there was any sign, just a subtle shift in the asphalt quality and the sudden appearance of identical mailboxes with cursive logos. My land, 2.5 acres of forest-lined freedom, sat right at the tail end of a sloping cul-de-sac just outside the HOA boundary by about 30 yards. I knew this because I'd cross-checked the GIS maps, ran the legal descriptions through my own software, and even dropped GPS markers on site using military-grade equipment I still had from my Army engineering days. There wasn't a shred of doubt. The land wasn't in the HOA, never had been. Still, I had a gut feeling that wouldn't leave me alone. Something about the way those identical houses glared at my beat-up drill rig trailer made me feel like I'd walked into a gated community without the gate. I spent my first 2 days setting up, leveled out the ground pad, connected the solar inverter array, calibrated the septic biofilter. It was peaceful. Birds, breeze, a bubbling creek. No drama until day 3. That morning, I went out to check the pump relays and found a laminated paper flag zip-tied to my front gate. Red letters. Pending HOA violation. Beneath that, a list of infractions I'd supposedly committed. Unauthorized dwelling, improper exterior materials, non-standard waste management system. I stared at it for a full 30 seconds before letting out a single laugh. It wasn't even taped. Someone had actually brought zip ties like they were tagging a deer carcass. Inside the mailbox was a glossy welcome brochure. Welcome to Oak Ridge Preserve, a premium residential community. Inside, a handwritten sticky note. Call the HOA office immediately to register your residency and schedule your inspection. No signature. I didn't call. Instead, I made a coffee, walked the property boundary again, then printed out a fresh copy of the plat map and stapled it to my front door for good measure. I knew this wasn't a mistake. This was someone testing the line, seeing if I'd fold and comply like a confused retiree who just wanted to keep the peace. And, sure enough, right on cue, she came. Early afternoon. A white Lexus SUV parked exactly 3 feet into my gravel shoulder. A woman stepped out with a clipboard and tablet, wearing a vest with HOA compliance embroidered over the chest, blonde bob haircut, pressed khakis, a scowl that looked laminated onto her face. She marched right up to my gate and tapped it with her tablet stylus like it was a faulty vending machine. I stepped out from behind the rain barrel with a wrench still in my hand. "Afternoon. Are you Mr. Taylor Hanks?" she asked without even saying hello. "Yep. I'm Karen Roseman, president of the Oak Ridge Preserve Homeowners Association. We have several issues to address regarding your presence on this parcel." I smiled. "Ma'am, with respect, I think you're confused. This parcel isn't part of your HOA. She gave a breathy little laugh, like I was a kindergartner who just said the moon was made of cheese. "That's not accurate. The Community Visual Integrity Committee reviewed your structure and determined it falls within the Oak Ridge visual domain. Your compliance is mandatory." "The Oak Ridge what?" She flipped her tablet around and showed me a pixelated Google Maps screenshot with a red oval she'd drawn over my lot. "As you can see, your home is visible from several HOA properties. By Section 12, anything in the visual domain of Oak Ridge must meet aesthetic and residency standards." "That's not how jurisdiction works," I said calmly. "Look, I bought this land at a county tax auction. Title's clear, no encumbrances. I even have a waiver from the county zoning board confirming it's not subject to any HOA covenants. You can check the parcel number yourself." "I already have," she said, "and there's a discrepancy. Your plot appears to have been improperly excluded from the Oak Ridge annexation map when the community expanded. We've since corrected that oversight." She said it so smoothly, so matter-of-factly, like she'd personally redrawn a map of America. "Did the county approve your correction?" "We haven't filed it with the county yet, But the board voted unanimously to recognize your parcel as part of our community. That makes you subject to immediate HOA review." I stared at her. She smiled tightly, victorious. Her badge gleamed like a sheriff's star in the late sun. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that a private volunteer board with no legal title over this land voted to annex a parcel they don't own, never maintained, and that sits 30 yards outside their plat boundary?" Karen didn't flinch. "It's about cohesion. You visually appear to be within our community. It would confuse other homeowners if we allowed unregulated dwellings to pop up on our borders." I laughed again, louder this time. "Karen, can I call you Karen? I'm not in your HOA. I don't want to be in your HOA, and if you or your board trespass on my land again, I'll be calling the sheriff, not the compliance committee." Her expression hardened. "You don't want to make enemies in this neighborhood, Mr. Hanks. Then maybe you should stop trying to regulate property you don't own." She stood there a moment, frozen like an app that couldn't load. Then she turned on her heel and walked back to her SUV, muttering something about non-compliance escalation. As she drove off, I saw her roll down the window and take a photo of my trailer. I walked back to the cabin and sat on the steps, sipping cold coffee and watching the dust settle. I knew then that this was only the beginning. I woke up the next morning to the sound of gravel crunching. Not the casual, slow roll of a neighbor's sedan easing out for work. No, this was deliberate. 2 vehicles, both heavy, idling near the edge of my driveway. I glanced at the clock. 7:11. Dead on. I pulled the curtain aside and saw 2 police cruisers parked half on the shoulder, half in the drainage ditch. One officer was already out talking to someone. And there she was, Karen Roseman in a neon windbreaker, flapping her arms like a falconer who'd lost control of her hawk. I took a breath, grabbed my folder of documents, and stepped outside. By the time I reached the gate, the younger officer was jotting something on a notepad, while the older one leaned on the hood, arms crossed. Karen saw me and pointed with all the self-righteous fury of a Pentecostal preacher on a caffeine binge. "There he is," she barked. "That's him, Taylor Hanks, unauthorized occupant of Parcel 17B. The older officer looked at me, nodded politely. "Morning, sir. Can we have a word?" "Of course," I said. "But before we get too deep into this, I've got something you'll want to see." I passed over a neatly clipped stack of documents: notarized deed from the county tax auction, official parcel plat, a GPS overlay of the Oak Ridge boundary, and a MON certification from the zoning board confirming I was outside any HOA jurisdiction. The older cop thumbed through the papers, then handed a few to his partner. "Looks pretty airtight," he muttered. "This is your land?" "Legally, yes. Physically, spiritually, and emotionally, too, after last night's mosquito swarm." The younger officer smirked. Karen did not. "This isn't about ownership," she snapped, stepping between us. "It's about compliance. He's occupying a property that visually appears to be part of Oak Ridge Preserve. That falls under our community cohesion guidelines." "Ma'am," the older officer said calmly, "you can't enforce rules on land that's not within your HOA's jurisdiction." "But we already reviewed this at a board meeting." "We voted." The officer raised an eyebrow. "You voted to enforce private rules on land you don't govern?" "We corrected an oversight," Karen insisted. "The county's map is outdated. We've amended our community diagram to include the buffer lots, including this one." I nearly laughed. "Is that before or after you annexed the moon?" "Because it's also visible from the cul-de-sac." The younger officer chuckled under his breath. Karen turned red. "He's building a structure without approval. There are exposed wires. No inspection tag. Children could wander in." "I'm 40 yards from the nearest HOA mailbox," I said. "And the only children around here are the ones inside your board meetings throwing tantrums in slacks." The older officer took a step back, clearly done playing referee. "Ma'am, Mr. Hanks isn't violating any laws. We've reviewed his documentation. His property is not under HOA jurisdiction. If you continue to interfere or come onto his land, you could be liable for harassment or trespassing." Karen's jaw tightened like she was chewing on a lemon dipped in battery acid. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I don't care what maps say. I will not let him degrade our community." I leaned on the gate, arms folded. "Karen, if you're this passionate about aesthetics, you might want to start by moving your Lexus off the drainage swale. You're 2 inches from a citation." The younger officer actually snorted. The older one straightened up. "Sir, ma'am, I think that's enough for today." Karen stormed back to her car, muttering something about county incompetence, and visual integrity violations. She peeled off down the road, tires spraying gravel across the ditch. The officers nodded politely and left soon after. I stood there a few minutes longer, watching the dust settle. Then I walked back inside, opened my laptop, and copied the droid footage from the morning's perimeter flight. The whole thing, from Karen's pointing to the Lexus retreat, was caught on crisp 4K, just in case. Not because I needed proof, but because I had a feeling she'd be back. By noon that same day, I'd edited together a clean 30-second clip from my drone footage. It opened on Karen flailing beside the police cruisers, demanding that the officers restore HOA sovereignty, and ended with her Lexus fishtailing down the gravel shoulder like a soap opera villain late to yoga. No narration, no music, just raw footage and one caption, "When you're not in the HOA." But Karen still calls the cops. I didn't expect it to go viral. All I did was upload it to a small local Telegram group where neighbors occasionally complained about recycling bins or raccoons. But within hours, the video had been reposted to 2 Facebook groups, a Reddit thread titled HOAs Gone Wild, and even made it into a local meme page under the watermark Oak Ridge Problems. By dusk, I had 3 missed calls, a dozen unread DMs, and a text from a guy down the road asking if I was the dude with the sovereign lot. I wasn't even sure what that meant, but I texted back, yeah, the HOA fugitive, apparently. The next day, things escalated. At around 10, while I was trenching a runoff path near the solar battery cabinet, a couple walked by with a stroller and slowed at my gate. I nodded politely. They lingered. "You're the guy from the video?" the man asked, smiling sheepishly. "Guilty." "Dude, that was hilarious," he said. "Karen is always up in everyone's business. She once tried to fine us for painting our door the wrong shade of beige." His wife chimed in, and she told my sister to park her hybrid at the guest lot because it wasn't aesthetically cohesive. She drives a Prius. I laughed. "You're welcome to park a tank on my land if you ever need to." That afternoon, someone anonymously taped a printed meme to my mailbox. It featured Karen mid-shriek, pointing at my gate like an HOA Gandalf, with the caption, "You shall not live here." I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy the sudden surge in neighborhood goodwill. People were waving. A man walking his dog gave me a thumbs up. One woman slowed her golf cart just to say, "Bless you for standing your ground." But not everyone was amused. Late that evening, I received an official-looking envelope shoved halfway into the mailbox, despite the no solicitation sticker. Inside was a cease and desist letter from the Oak Ridge Preserve HOA, printed on faux marble stationery. It accused me of defamation, public disparagement, and unlawful distribution of digital media featuring HOA officials without their consent. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on a mouthful of sweet tea. I called my lawyer, Audrey, a friend from my military days now living off-grid in Arizona and specializing in property disputes and digital rights. She reviewed the footage and the letter, then sent back a response in under an hour. It was 5 paragraphs of calm, precise legal phrasing that boiled down to, "Your HOA has no authority over this land, and you have no standing to make demands regarding events occurring outside your jurisdiction. Furthermore, public recordings made on or from private property, especially those involving interactions with law enforcement, are constitutionally protected. Kindly take your grievances and shove them where your bylaws don't reach." We sent that letter back via certified mail with a signature receipt. Later that week, someone created a TikTok remix of the video with auto-tuned clips of Karen yelling and the police officer saying, "Ma'am, this isn't your jurisdiction." It got over 20,000 views in a day. The HOA tried to shut down the Facebook thread, but screenshots had already escaped into the wider internet. Karen's name wasn't mentioned directly, but locals knew, and they whispered. I began receiving emails, some funny, some desperate, from residents in nearby communities, people with their own stories of HOA madness. One woman from across town said her HOA once tried to regulate the height of her sunflowers. Another guy told me he'd been fined for having a non-standard mailbox because it was 4 inches too tall, thanks to frost heave. I wasn't a hero. I didn't even intend to be a protest symbol. I just wanted to build a water system, enjoy the damn creek, and not be harassed by a woman with a clipboard and delusions of empire. But it was clear now. Karen had picked the wrong parcel to colonize, and everyone knew it. It was the kind of South Carolina morning that tried to pass for polite overcast, windless, quiet, but it had that particular tension in the air that made the hairs on my arms stand up before anything even happened. I was halfway through assembling a runoff diverter when the warning ping came from my drone. Motion detected at the perimeter. I pulled up the live feed on my phone. Sure enough, white Lexus SUV at the gate. Again, but this time Karen wasn't alone. 2 others had come with her. One tall, skinny man in a brown HOA windbreaker with Landscape Review Committee embroidered on the back, like it meant something. The other, a broad-shouldered woman with a clipboard and an unnecessarily aggressive visor. They looked like a suburban exorcism team. All 3 walked onto my property like they owned the mineral rights. Karen carried a stack of laminated signs. I stepped out of the trailer slowly, wiping my hands with a rag, and met them at the clearing near my solar hub. Karen didn't wait. "Mr. Hanks," she said, like she was announcing a tax audit. "We're implementing an emergency visual condemnation of this lot in accordance with HOA aesthetic emergency protocols." "Emergency what?" I asked, eyes narrowing. She handed me a laminated notice with a big red stamp across the top. "Condemned, unsafe conditions, community eyesore, corrective action required." They began planting red flag markers around the property. One by the rain barrel, another near the septic field. One went right in front of my solar inverters. I stood still for a moment, just watching. Visor woman moved toward the pump cabinet and started taking photos. The guy from Landscape Review squatted by my irrigation pipe and tapped at the ground like he was listening for Soviet submarines. Then Karen did it. She marched over to my utility panel, unscrewed the latch on the aluminum cover, and pulled it open. That was enough. "Close that," I said, flat voice. "Right now." She turned toward me with a condescending tilt of the head. "We're inspecting for unregulated electrical systems. These units weren't reviewed by the HOA utilities coordinator. This isn't HOA land. You have no authority here. Shut it now, or I'll shut it for you." She actually rolled her eyes and said, "If you're so confident in your compliance, you shouldn't mind transparency." I walked over, calmly, firmly. Reached past her, flipped the panel closed, and locked it with a padlock. "That's criminal trespass and tampering with infrastructure." Karen turned red. Not embarrassed, furious. "We are well within our rights. Your property is a threat to community safety. Your system could explode. My system passed county inspection 2 weeks ago. Unlike you, the county actually has jurisdiction." The visor woman tried to intervene. "We're just following procedures, sir." "No, you're not," I said. "You're about 10 minutes away from a police report." I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff's department. Told them calmly, "I've got unauthorized individuals tampering with private electrical infrastructure. On camera. No consent. Need a unit out here, ASAP," Karen snapped. "You don't need to involve law enforcement every time we try to improve community standards." "You're not improving anything," I said. "You're trespassing, defacing, and now trying to access power systems you don't understand." Karen huffed and turned toward her companions. "Wrap it up. We'll escalate through legal." They began collecting their laminated flyers. One got stuck in the mud and trudged back to the SUV. I stood at the driveway until I saw their taillights disappear past the Oak Ridge. 20 minutes later, Deputy Alvarez arrived. He was one of the same officers from the earlier incident. I showed him the drone footage, the panel tampering, the red flags, and the notices they'd posted. He whistled. "You weren't kidding. They really think they're City Hall." "She opened a live panel," I said. "That's not just trespassing. That's sabotage if I'm feeling generous." He nodded. "We'll file it as unlawful entry and tampering with utilities. Recommend getting the electrical inspected again just to be safe." I agreed. Before he left, he added, "Word's going around. A lot of folks are rooting for you." I spent the next few hours removing their signs, wiping off the adhesive residue they left behind. One of them had been zip-tied to my water tower ladder. Another was screwed directly into a wooden post. I kept them all as evidence. That evening, I installed 2 new infrared floodlights and mounted another drone to do a night run, just in case someone got creative after dark. Karen had crossed a line, not metaphorically, literally. And I wasn't letting that go unanswered. It took 3 days for the paperwork to arrive. Thick manila envelope, stamped with faux legal gravitas and hand-delivered by some unfortunate courier who looked like he'd just been screamed at for ringing the doorbell. Inside was a formal complaint, filed by the Oak Ridge Preserve Homeowners Association, signed not by a lawyer, but by Karen herself, acting as designated compliance representative for the Executive Oversight Subcommittee. I didn't know whether to laugh or call animal control. The complaint alleged that I was knowingly occupying a parcel subject to Visual Annexation Authority and had repeatedly refused to comply with lawful aesthetic standards despite formal community censure. According to them, the HOA had ratified an emergency inclusion amendment which placed my property, get this, within visual adjacency boundaries, thereby placing it under interpretive governance. I reread that line 3 times and still couldn't decide whether it was legalese or fan fiction. What they were trying to do, in plain English, was retroactively claim my land by inventing a set of bylaws that redefined jurisdiction to include anything that could be seen from HOA streets. It was like they decided land didn't matter, optics did. I scanned the complaint, found 4 factual errors in the first paragraph, and texted Audrey, my lawyer. She replied with 3 words, "Please, let's dance." She filed the response the same day. Motion to dismiss request for sanctions and a counterclaim for trespassing, attempted sabotage of utilities, harassment, and unlawful claims of jurisdiction. We attached drone footage, GPS boundary verification, zoning commission letters, and a notarized statement from the county clerk confirming that Oak Ridge Preserve's boundaries ended 31 yards north of my mailbox. Audrey's response didn't just debunk Karen's claim, it set fire to it and scattered the ashes over a topographic survey. But Karen wasn't done. 2 days later, I spotted her Lexus parked half-hidden behind a decorative privacy hedge near the cul-de-sac. She was just sitting there, staring toward my property, engine running, AC fogging the windows, like a suburban sniper waiting for a flag violation. I walked out to the gate, waved casually. She didn't move, just drove off after a minute, like she'd convinced herself she'd won something by being creepy in broad daylight. That same afternoon, I received a letter from the HOA's Ethics Committee, another invention, no doubt. It threatened to report me to the county for illegal wastewater design, citing an alleged community concern about runoff contamination. I forwarded it to the county water authority. They laughed. No, literally, the guy from the Environmental Compliance Office left a voicemail saying, "This lady just submitted a complaint with a hand-drawn map and a printed screenshot from Google Earth. No coordinates, no sample logs. Just a red circle and the words possible pipe underlined 3 times. But even so, I had to take it seriously. Karen wasn't fighting fair. She was playing HOA politics, throwing paperwork like grenades and hoping something would land. So we fought back, and fought hard. Audrey submitted a motion to not only dismiss the HOA's claim, but to initiate a declaratory judgment, a court order formally stating that Oak Ridge Preserve had 0 jurisdiction over my land, now or ever. If we won that, it would make it nearly impossible for Karen or any future clipboard cultists to resurrect this insanity. That motion included an affidavit from the zoning supervisor, a sworn statement from the county assessor, drone overlays, and an expert witness declaration from a GIS specialist who annotated every plat revision over the past 20 years. It wasn't just overkill, it was carpet bombing. And that's when it happened. Oak Ridge Preserve HOA board members started to fracture. I began receiving anonymous emails from HOA residents. One even included screenshots from an internal group chat where board members debated whether Karen had gone too far. In one, someone wrote, "She's turning the whole neighborhood into a meme war zone. Maybe it's time we cut her loose." That was the moment I knew the tide had turned. Karen had poked too many bears, and now even her own were growling back. I thought it was over when the board started to eat itself alive. But Karen wasn't just stubborn, she was radioactive, and like all toxic waste, she leaked. It started small. A few garden lights I'd installed along the walkway flickered out one night. I checked the power box. 2 wires had been cleanly snipped, not chewed by raccoons, not weather-worn, snipped with precision. Then the flag over my mailbox went missing. I found it later shoved under a bush 20 feet from the driveway. My security cameras didn't catch anything, not directly, but the motion sensor by the utility shed recorded brief movement just before midnight. Tall figure, moving fast, wearing a hoodie. Guess who I saw walking her dog 5 minutes later on the same trail? Karen. No dog bags, no flashlight, just her, pretending to be getting her steps in. The real warning shot came that Saturday. I returned home after a supply run and found 3 HOA volunteers standing on my lot, clipboard guy, tape measure guy, and a woman with a neon vest who looked like she took HOA bylaws more seriously than the Constitution. They were placing bright orange condemned flags near my septic line, my water system intake, and the solar inverter by the utility wall. I pulled up slowly in my truck, rolled down the window, and said, "Y'all lose a scavenger hunt or something." The woman stiffened. "This property has been identified for emergency review pending retroactive code enforcement. Please step aside." I parked, got out, calm as hell. "Emergency review by whom?" "Oak Ridge Preserve Special Compliance Team," she replied, holding up a laminated badge that looked like it came from a printer jam at Office Depot. "My land," I said, "is not under your compliance. And those flags, get them off my system. You're trespassing." "We have jurisdiction via visual adjacency," clipboard guy added without blinking. I pulled out my phone, already dialing the sheriff's office. "Tell that to the deputy," I said. "He's going to love hearing about your fake inspection." They scattered before the cruiser even arrived. I still filed the report. The deputy reviewed the footage, took my statement, and let me know this wasn't the first time the HOA had stretched its boots. His words. That night, I watched the drone footage back with a cold beer and a sharper temper. The drone had caught them entering from the Oak Ridge Trail side, cutting across the creek with a small folding bridge they must have built, just to avoid the front gate camera. Creepy and clever. That bridge was gone the next day, torn down. But the drone had it all. So I sent the clip to Audrey, along with a time-stamped export and high-res photos of where they stepped, flagged, and fumbled. She smiled, digitally anyway. "This is sabotage, trespass, and attempted tampering with private infrastructure. I'm filing an amended complaint in the morning." And she did. We added a criminal referral to the sheriff's office for attempted utility interference. That's a felony in South Carolina. By Monday, HOA residents were buzzing. My mailbox was stuffed with anonymous notes. Most supportive, one even said, "We didn't vote for this." Karen's out of control. Another came with a screenshot of a heated neighborhood group chat. Karen apparently had ordered the compliance action without informing the board. She declared it time-sensitive due to health risks posed by unauthorized water systems. Her own VP had commented, "You can't just declare someone's off-grid setup dangerous because it makes your subdivision look less upscale." Her reply, "He's a threat to our visual order." Visual order. I'd heard enough nonsense from HOA officials in my life, but that phrase belonged on a t-shirt sold at authoritarian rallies. That week, I doubled my drone patrols, installed 2 more motion sensors near the creek line, and upgraded the locks on all panels. Then I had a local friend laser engrave a sign for my driveway. "Private property not in HOA trespassers will be charged and shamed online petty?" Maybe. Necessary. Absolutely. The day we got the court date, I framed the notification and hung it above my workbench, right between the torque wrench and the bottle opener. October 17th. That was the day Karen Roseman would finally have to sit across from me, not with a clipboard or a fake badge, but in front of a judge. Audrey prepped our filing with surgical precision. Every clip, every drone shot, every notarized record and map was bound and indexed. We didn't just walk into court, we marched in with an arsenal of truth. Karen, meanwhile, arrived in a navy blue pantsuit, 2 sizes too optimistic, dragging 2 HOA board members behind her like nervous interns on their first field trip. They looked less like allies and more like people forced to sit at a table with a ticking bomb. She opened by claiming I'd unlawfully constructed critical infrastructure without civil compliance. She tried to reframe my septic system as a hazardous underground tank, and my solar panels as unauthorized reflective surfaces affecting community aesthetics. The judge blinked. "Ma'am, is this a private residence?" I nodded. 2.5 acres, paid in full, out of HOA bounds. Deed recorded in Pickens County. Would you like to see it again? He waved it off. "We've got the file. Continue." Karen kept going. She even accused me of manipulating digital content by faking drone footage. Audrey didn't flinch. She handed over raw drone telemetry logs, GPS stamps, and metadata exports. Karen's mouth thinned into a pencil line. But the moment that cracked the whole thing open was when Audrey asked to admit HOA's own bylaws and district jurisdiction map into evidence. The judge reviewed it, raised an eyebrow, and looked straight at Karen. "According to your own documents, your HOA boundary ends 30 yards from the defendant's property line. That correct?" Karen froze, then nodded just once, tight as a fist. Then explain, the judge said, on what authority your group conducted inspections, planted condemnation flags, and attempted to access private infrastructure. Her voice cracked. We believed the community had a right to enforce order. The community, he repeated slowly, is not a governing body. It is a neighborhood. I don't think Karen truly understood, even then, that this wasn't just a scolding. The judge turned to the court reporter. I am issuing a cease and desist injunction against Oak Ridge Preserve HOA from any further action concerning Mr. Hank's property. I am also referring the matter of attempted infrastructure tampering to the county prosecutor. Her face drained. One of her board members actually slid his chair a few inches away from her. We left the courthouse to local reporters with mics and cameras in tow. Someone from a regional outlet had picked up the story after the drone clip hit 50,000 views. I didn't say much, but Audrey gave a brief statement about illegal HOA overreach and citizens knowing their rights. Karen ducked behind a minivan, shielding her face with a manila folder. The fallout came fast. Within 72 hours, Oak Ridge's HOA group chat leaked screenshots of a secret email chain where Karen had pushed members to expand their footprint quietly to maintain property uniformity. She'd even promised preferential lawn care contracts to those who voted to support it. Bribes, votes, secrets, all in writing. Emergency board meeting. Karen was removed as president by unanimous vote. Civil penalties followed. $12,000 in fines for trespass, utility tampering, and unauthorized enforcement actions. And Audrey wasn't done. She filed to recover my legal costs, damages for the vandalism to my solar array, and the stress of living under HOA siege. The court granted it. Total, another $23,000 on Karen's tab. That woman, who used to patrol with a fake badge and call herself the last line of HOA defense, now had to sell her custom golf cart to start paying her legal fees. I don't like destroying people. I really don't. But if you build a career on control, deception, and intimidation, eventually you'll pull that last power move on the wrong damn person. And that day, it was me. I always knew the story wouldn't end in a courtroom. That kind of mess leaves splinters in a town like this. Splinters that either fester or get pulled out in the open. And Karen. She wasn't the type to vanish quietly. Not yet. About a week after the ruling, I came home from a service job in the foothills, parked my truck, walked toward the gate, and noticed something odd. The solar panel switch housing had been moved again. Barely, just an inch. But I'd installed those covers myself. They don't move by accident. My boots made crunching sounds on the gravel as I walked the perimeter. That's when I saw it. Fresh boot prints in the back corner, by the line where my land drops toward the creek. Smaller than mine. Flat-soled, 2 sets. I opened the barn, pulled the hard case, and launched the perimeter drone. Nothing out of place up top. No damage, no flags. But when I checked the thermal overlay, 2 distinct footprints still glowed faint against the morning dew pattern. Someone had been snooping again, and odds were it wasn't a deer checking my power setup. I called the sheriff. Again. This time, it wasn't just about trespass. It was about someone coming back after a court ruling with clear, malicious intent. The deputy took the report seriously. He recognized me from the previous visit, recognized the case, even shook my hand and said, "You're the guy with the HOA takedown video." That week, I put up cameras, motion-triggered, cellular-linked, with backup power sources. Audrey helped me file a restraining order expansion. It was granted. Karen now couldn't come within 100 yards of my fence without triggering a legal response. Around the same time, local residents started stopping by. First one guy, then a couple. Retirees, couples, even a college student with a beat-up SUV. Most of them had their own Karen stories, quiet ones, fines for growing the wrong flowers, HOA letters about parking distance from sidewalks, threats for flying flags. One woman had been fined $300 for excessive hummingbird feeders. That's when I knew it was time for something new. I opened a free blog, Not in Your HOA. My first post was titled, When They Try to Manage What They Don't Own. It got traction fast. Local folks shared it, then regional ones. I started posting simple breakdowns. How to read your deed, how to check your property boundary, how to confirm HOA coverage, or lack thereof. I linked maps, tools, drone footage examples. Soon, I was doing small consultations. Nothing formal, just neighbor to neighbor. It pissed Karen off even more. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she'd tried to get back on the board. Twice. Failed both times. Apparently, someone in the HOA group had printed and laminated a meme of her standing in front of my gate, being corrected by the police, and pinned it on the clubhouse corkboard. They called it "The Day the Queen Lost Her Crown." Meanwhile, I was back to drilling wells and installing off-grid systems. People liked hiring me now. Said they trusted a guy who could outwit a Karen with a drone and a deed. One morning, I finished repainting the gate. Fresh dark stain, new hinges, clean lines. And just before I headed inside, I bolted on the new sign I'd had laser etched in town. Private property, not HOA, not your business. If confused, ask Karen to show you the court order. Every now and then, I still catch someone slowing down to read it. They linger, laugh a little, and drive on. I don't wave. I let the sign do the talking. That's all the welcome they'll ever need.